Hey guys, Ariel Adams and David Bredan here from aBlogtoWatch. It is the end of SIHH 2019. We are a little on the exhausted side. We've had, I don't know how many meetings, there's about 35 brands here. We have met with almost all of them. And we have sort of residual thoughts about this show and what we remember. David, what is something that just stands out to you as just one of the top things you remember about the show that we just saw?
Well, it's the craziness of it all the running around and meeting people and seeing all these amazing watches. It's always a privilege to be here, even though it's hard work. I think we really do enjoy it.
Oh, we definitely enjoy it, and yes, it's like a blur of just lots and lots of watches.
Yeah.
And when I started coming to the show approximately 10 years ago, the volume of watches we saw was a lot less. And we progressively see less and less new watches coming out at the show. It's not that the brands are all releasing less watches, but they spread them out through other parts of the year. So in some ways the show is easier for us because there's less things to shoot, but at the same time it can be frustrating because, you know, is this watch going to be something that's coming out later? Are there more watches that you can show us? There's always sort of a struggle with the brands because they're torn, right? This show has traditionally been about meeting with retailers to sell watches in the wholesale, and over the last couple of years, the importance of not just this watch trade show, but all watch trade shows have been more about speaking to the media as well as speaking directly to the public. And I think that's been one of the difficult things for the show because they've had to transfer their energy and their strategy and a lot of the things they do to this new type of role that trade shows, especially in the luxury and watch industry, have played, and they're not all great at it. So there's a lot of a friction going on that will be smoothed out eventually, but we're sort of in a not so well oiled machine, if you know what I mean.
There's another aspect to that, I think. That's a really good point, but I see that also reflected in the products. I see that there's this conflict between looking into the past and just regurgitating it all the time because it's safe and that's something that they think people want, and sure, some people do. But how long can you go on dwelling on your history and on your vintage releases and just showing them over and over again?
Well, we as watch experts and writers are a different breed of people because we want to be excited. We want to see new watches, we want to see exciting watches, we want to see new movements, high complications, but ultimately what we want isn't necessarily the things that are selling. And one of the most dramatic shifts that I've seen over the last couple of years is this hyper focus on what is going to sell. And an easy way to determine what is going to sell tomorrow is to look at what sold yesterday. And that really represents one of the major reasons why we see all this vintage, heritage, reissue,
tradition.
This worked then. And we definitely saw a lot of that this year. It's by no means secluded to just SIHH. Even at Baselworld, we see a lot of coming out again with something that worked in the past, whether it's a design, whether it's a strategy, whether it's a movement, and it's still novelty that I think we're looking for. Were there some novel things at the show? Absolutely. So my question for you, David, is what are some of the watches that were truly new? Not necessarily ones that you like, but just truly new things that you recognize. I wouldn't even imagine that. It blew my mind.
It blew my mind, not necessarily positively, but obviously it has to be the AP Code 1159. And that really shows what happens when a brand is dwelling on its history for so long that creativity sort of dries up. And when you try to restart it again, it's really hard. It's hard work because it's gone. You've been doing the same thing with a tweak here or a tweak there, but when you want to conceive a new collection from the get-go, you throw at it whatever you have. And AP is great at making cases, and we saw that reflected in the Code 1159. But as a complete package, I think it was a miss because they just simply didn't have it in their current DNA or the last couple of years on how to do something like this.
The Code 1159 was definitely the most talked about watch at the show, hands down. What sticks out to me is a watch like the Vacheron Constantin, the Twin Beat, I believe it was called.
Yep.
A $200,000 watch, so definitely not for everyone, but it had a system where you could manually switch between a 5 Hertz mode and a 1.2 Hertz mode. And the idea of the 1.2 Hertz mode is that if you set the watch down on a table, in a case, somewhere where it's not moving, it'll have a power reserve of up to 65 days. In 5 Hertz mode, I think it was about 4 days.
Yep.
And this is a system that allows you to interact with your watch. You have more of a emotional connection to it, but it's also very practical. And I love seeing that, and it wasn't something that I anticipated.
Yeah. The question is whether or not that can be introduced into more affordable watches, though.
Probably.
I think there's a way, right?
Probably.
Maybe you can reduce, like, or change the gearing and just have one balance wheel or some other way to that. But practicality in terms, like, it's very rare that we see, like, a solution. We are missing out on a micro-adjust bracelet on a lot of watches today, luxury watches. So it's very rare to see real advancements in creature comforts, even like an affordable level.
One of the biggest questions that people had is, what do you think about the Richard Mille Bonbon collection? Every single Richard Mille watch presented at the show, and again, this is the last year that Richard Mille is going to be here. It's also the last year that Audemars Piguet is going to be here. Richard Mille introduced a large collection, I think it was about 10 watches, maybe a little bit more, of watches inspired by fruit and candy. And I thought they were fun, and they were artistic, and they were very on brand, and some people really didn't like them. I'm not the target consumer, but they made me smile. And at the end of the day, when I look at a watch that makes me smile, I feel like it's a success.
It's a job done well.
Yeah, it's definitely a job done well. We are now in the watchmaker square, that as they call it, where the independents are. And usually the watches from the independents feel very, very different than the watches from the big brands. A lot of the brands here, had very sort of mild new collections, maybe some line extensions. Did you see any really major cultural difference or style difference between the watches from the independents and the ones we saw at the big brands?
Absolutely, because they don't have the history and what we just talked about. They need to be creative. They cannot be saying, hey, this is what we did 50 years ago. Many of these guys weren't even alive 50 years ago, so they cannot say this is what I did whenever. No, they have to be creative to make an impact, to be heard, to be seen. And that's great for creativity. And this is why I think so many of us migrate towards independence, because that's where fun releases, like your Joker, are made.
Yeah, and we had a lot of people ask us about the resonance with the E-Crown. Last year is when they came out with the E-Crown as a concept, and this year you can now buy the E-Crown. This is a watch which is entirely mechanical, but the crown is electronic. What does that mean? The crown remembers the time and winds the watch. So you have a system that is both, I'll call it digital, and it also has an optional connectivity to an app, as well as this fully mechanical side. It's a cool looking timepiece. It's something that I cannot ever imagine would come out from one of the big brands.
Yeah.
Yet here we see it here. It's still a $40,000 watch, and it's extremely exciting, which very cool. Was there something like that here from the independents that you thought was really cool?
Really cool? Well, we've seen a few cool things at MBNF for sure, at Clog.
Yeah.
Some things we're not allowed to talk about just yet. They are about to come and they just blew me away.
People want details.
They will receive them eventually.
They will.
We really are not allowed to talk about them just yet. And of course, there's the Moser Nature Watch, whatever it's called. I'm not even sure what it's called. It's hilarious.
Not purchasable, but you have to water it twice a day. Okay, so let's talk to all the people who are not high-end collectors and a $200,000 or $100,000 watch is not in their budget. What at SIHH is something that's coming out in the next few months that not the average person, but your mainstream luxury buyer might look forward to wanting to buy?
The Bowmatic from Bowman Mercier was a really pleasant surprise. I'm not even sure if I saw it last year, but this year when I put it on, it was very slim, very well-made case, beautiful dial, and so on. And I thought to myself, this is a really competitive package as it is.
It's probably the most affordable watch here.
Yep.
The Clifton Bowmatic has an average price point of about $3,000 with a 5-day automatic
cost chronometer.
Watch. Yeah, that's cost chronometer certified. It's a basic dress watch. It has a modern element to it. It's something you could wear for 20, 30 years and look good on you.
Yeah.
It's not like a sports watch. You and I are like sports watches a lot. In terms of like sports watches, I think that Panerai probably stole the show. They finally had some new things. And to say that Panerai has something new is actually a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
Because usually it's minor tweaks. We saw a new handset, a new bezel, some new dial designs, and some new concepts. And I would say in terms of brand evolution, I've seen the most movement at Panerai. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would. I really like the experience concept, and I really like the focus on the 42 submersibles. Because for a long time, I've been thinking to myself, I see Panerai paying attention to what collectors actually want, but I was never that guy. I was never like, oh, this is great, like this obscure detail is now on this watch. But I always missed the 42 millimeter submersible. There were a few here and there, but they were really rare. And now there are a bunch of options, all released in 1 year, that I can choose from because, 47 millimeter submersible just doesn't look good on me. So now there's a bunch of options. They're quite pricey, but at least they're available.
IWC had some similar good sport watch offerings, a little bit more on the affordable level.
Yep.
Not a lot of novelty. They took concepts that worked in the past, like Top Gun, and came out with them again. But remember, there is the new Top Gun movie coming out, so I think it makes sense for them to sort of put a lot of emphasis in the Top Gun name. For me, one of the most surprising brands, and it wasn't really new stuff, but at a brand like Piaget that had a lot of beautiful colors, really nicely executed things. I mean, one of the things at the show that we saw a lot of was the color blue. The color blue might as well have been the thematic ambassador of SIHH 2019. It was blue everywhere. And so we went to brands that had something other than blue. We were like
shocking.
very, very excited. Green, for example.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's cool. I also think that Mont Blanc had some really marketable watches, and the Cartier Santos chronograph was definitely something I think people are going to look forward to seeing.
We like that thing.
Yeah, definitely. What about for you? What was the surprising brand that you met that you saw? These are nice watches.
Well, I think we've mentioned all of them, honestly. So the next step for us is to start editing and to agree on a top 10 list of our favorite watches from SIHH 2019.
We've taken hundreds and hundreds of pictures. We've seen
Thousands.
dozens and dozens of watches.
Yeah.
It's going to take quite a while to release all the content, but we are going to take our time to make sure that we have great in-depth analysis on all the great watches we saw here at SIHH 2019. Thank you so much for following our coverage. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to sharing everything with you on aBlogtoWatch.
Thanks, everyone.